got a quorum and everybody that we were expecting to be here. So, this is a meeting of the New Windsor Planning Commission. It's a little different date than we normally have. We work from an agenda, and the agenda was put together about a week ago with information. And we do have a little bit of a change to our schedule in that we're not going to continue this month with a review specifically of the comprehensive plan, but there is an element that we need some information on, and that is the main part of this meeting. But the first order of business will be a review of the minutes from the last meeting, the 28th of May. Does anybody have any questions, comments about the minutes?
From what I remember and the minutes, I don't see any corrections or additions.
So
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes as written.
got a motion from Drew. Second?
I'll second that.
Second by Dave. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Good. That was Drew, Dave, Jay. Okay. I don't see Randolph, and we haven't heard from him, so I'll skip quickly. Our next meeting, we'll keep it at the 22nd of July. Will that work, Emily Ann? Okay, good. So and we'll get back to the comprehensive plan, nuts and bolts. And I'll check with Randolph and see if we can make sure we can get him there. All right, so the star of the evening, she's smiling. It's going to be Wayne, but now since you're smiling, Michelle, you can.
Wayne is always the star.
Yes. And thank you both for preparing. I see we've got something from both of you, so the floor is yours, Michelle. You can
I'll
talk
start
about it.
because I am much more boring than these gentlemen will be. What I handed out is a summary of the statutory process to annex property in the state of Maryland. You will be pleased to know I did not include all of the section citations or the stuff that makes it even worse to read. And I will certainly not read it to you, because you probably know a lot of it already. The state law provides that any municipality can enlarge its boundaries, and that's the threshold, with a few really minor, well, sometimes not minor, but I think in this circumstance would be minor restrictions. The property to be annexed must be contiguous to the municipality. In other words, you couldn't go halfway down to, Newmarket and just decided there's a farm you liked. It has to be contiguous. And you cannot create an enclave. You can't incorporate an area that leaves sort of a donut hole of unincorporated area. That's referred to as an enclave. It's very simple. There's two ways that an annexation can be initiated: by the government or by individual property owners. There are requirements for consent for both of those ways. I don't believe, unless somebody's holding out on me, that the town has any present anticipation of initiating an annexation. So most of this conversation will probably be about property owners or residents of an area. But the process is essentially the same. Once someone files a petition, and not just like on the phone, has to file a petition, a formal petition.
Files a formal petition.
With the town.
With the town.
Yes,
Okay.
with the town. And then those requirements for consent would have to be confirmed, which if you've got 35 people signing, then their signatures and the fact that they reside, et cetera, would have to be verified. If you don't have a significant amount of residential users in the property to be annexed, I mean, you don't have to move people in so they can sign. It's just the owner is adequate to meet that. That resolution, then the legislative body can, if it would introduce a resolution on annexation. Like any other legislative action, the introduction of such a resolution does not guarantee the adoption of such a resolution. But on request, I have not seen anything in either the statute or the annotations to the statute that allow for the legislative body to refuse a request. You can deny it, but I think you have to hear it. See what I'm saying? Then there has to be that resolution. There's a petition and a resolution. The resolution will specify exactly where, meets and bounds description, and the law says provide for any special treatments for the new area as to taxation or other municipal services. It is legally possible to create like a taxing district on a new area that's coming in. Creating a taxing district has other statutory requirements that we're not going to go into now. But that's the resolution. Has also would have any other conditions that either the applicant's asking for, generally, what zoning category the property will go in, and we're going to come back, there's another issue on that. And other, if there are any other conditions, either the applicant is requesting or the town is requiring at that point. We're still at the resolution point, remember. The law is silent on who drafts that. I know from past experience way back in the day, even before my time, right after the Civil War, the Marker Lovell did those resolutions. There's 2 or 3 individual lot resolutions, and he did them. I think that is probably uncalled for, and I think your applicant should also prepare for your review that resolution, because why should you pay for it? So that the resolution then gets sent around. Oh, wait, I forgot, I'm jumping. Along with the resolution, the law now requires, and I say now, but it's been 15 years now, an annexation plan that has to address how municipal services are going to be extended, how municipal services are going to be paid for such an extension, what the land use is, how long it's going to take to get municipal services. And this is the language in the law. The plan must be presented so as to demonstrate the available land for public facilities that may be considered reasonably necessary for the proposed use, including facilities for school, water or sewage treatment, libraries, recreation, or fire and police. Let's say you were going to annex in a parcel that is going to need a well and a pump station. The plan would also want to say, not only it needs a well and a pump station, but there's an additional 2 acres, 5 acres, however much a well and a pump station needs. That would, all of that detail would be in the plan. The plan is actually a lot more detailed than the resolutions generally are. Honestly, I haven't seen too many annexations over the last, say, 10 or 15 years. And a lot of that is because water and sewer has gotten difficult to find and or pay for. But it is still legally possible. So you'd have the resolution and the plan.
And the plan is put together by?
Well, generally would be put together or would be submitted and suggested, I would say, by the applicant. But again, a lot of this depends on if a lot of this whole process would depend on if the town is happy and looking forward to this annexation, or the town is unconvinced, or the town is taking it because their lawyer said, I think you have to take it, but you don't have to do it. Annexation is always completely at the town's discretion. There is, let me just finish my sentence. There is no way that you can be forced to do it either by a mandamus action or anything of that sort. If the town determines it is not getting any bigger, it's not getting any bigger. But if the town determines that it wants to, then you start to do the kind of a negotiation. A lot of times property, Glenn knows this better than I do, property might be annexed in with now this isn't relevant to us, but with a school site. And one of the reasons you get annexed in is because you have this lovely school site. And that's how things develop. That's absolutely proper. That's just how it works. Once you get to the point of a resolution and a plan, oh, I'm sorry, David.
I think you kind of addressed it, but can that plan, does that plan become, you said negotiations, does it become a back and forth?
It can be, yeah.
With the town? Because
Yeah, it
I
can be.
don't necessarily see how maybe the person that was submitting this would have all of the
They
information.
don't have all of that information. That's exactly it. So the law does not address a lot of these things. The practice addresses a lot of these things. There are a handful of cases, usually out of down that way, you know, what do they call it? National Capital Park area, that whole area has annexation abilities and battles, but there's not a whole lot of battles that address like who writes a resolution. Is it legit? Was it adopted properly? There's case law on that. Now, I just read, for this purpose, the annotations that are immediately available to me in the Mickey books, in the text, in the code books. But that is not all of the case law that exists. But at this point, I felt fairly confident you didn't want to spend a couple of $1,000s on me learning more stuff that might or might not be necessary to know for tonight. So I didn't do it. So you have that resolution, you have the plan. The resolution's introduced, then you have a hearing on it. It has to be advertised 4 times over the course of 4 weeks in the newspaper of general circulation in the area, which of course here is the Carroll County Times because that's all there is. That also has to be sent, the resolution and the plan have to be sent to the county, to, I don't know if there is, the state or local regional authorities, any regional or state agency with jurisdiction in the county. I don't really think there is one here, but that's what the law says, and that's why I'm giving it to you. And the annexation plan also has to go to the Department of Planning, Maryland Department of Planning. So then you have a public hearing. I would imagine that your public hearing might be a little more eagerly attended than some of the public hearings we have here. And then you decide if you're going to adopt or not adopt. If you adopt, that resolution is not effective for 45 days. Because there are ways you can, opponents of that can force or can attempt to force a referendum on that resolution. 3 different entities can bring a referendum. The people being annexed, the county, if the county objects, or the general citizenry. I think it's 20% of the registered voters in the area to be annexed, or 25% of the qualified voters in the town. So if you decided you wanted to annex and there was a great hoopla, and 20% of your registered voters signed petitions that said, we want a referendum on this, we want to vote on this, then the staff would have to validate all of those signatures like any other petition. And there would subsequently be a referendum vote on it. or the county can actually do it. And there's a whole bunch of requirements for notice on those, and if there are commercial users in the area, there are separate notice requirements for those, but again, I figured this was gonna be a mouthful enough for y'all to try and swallow. But there's one more thing that is part of this process, that the county has to approve the new zoning if it is significantly different or more than 50% more dense than the old zoning. So if you were bringing in a farm, which is probably zoned ag, Judge, and you wanted to zone it for 10 houses an acre, obviously that is significantly more dense. So the county has to approve that, and if the county doesn't approve that, the developer of the property can ultimately develop it however he or she wants, but they can't do it for 5 years. So that process is generally referred to in this world as the waiver. Does it have the waiver? Yeah, it has the waiver. That's another thing that is generally known, I would imagine, in advance. I have not personally been on the applicant side of an annexation, so I don't know exactly how that logistically works, but I do know that that must be done. One last thing, and what actually brings us to this is, or at least to the discussion of this, is that in that plan, the requirements for the plan provide that the annexation must be consistent with the master plan. So that's why we get to the property that we've been talking about, that we've been asked to talk about, is not currently in the growth area boundary. In order for the annexation even to be considered, it has to be consistent with your master plan, and if the area is not in the growth area boundary, it is not consistent with your master plan. So that's where the process would not proceed any farther unless and until it became part of your growth area boundary. Does that make sense?
So Michelle, we had talked earlier as a group about the growth area boundary, and we had discussed that if we were to put a property in the growth area boundary, we would be doing so with the intention that someday that piece of property would be annexed. We wouldn't just make the growth area boundary anything without considering those properties. We would we consider them viable to be annexed. Okay, so if we were to put a said piece of property into the growth area boundary, we would be doing so believing that someday we would be going through this statutory process, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So my question is, if we put something in the growth area boundary, can we have hooks on that so that anybody that was to be annexed would know? For instance, let's just get right to it. If we said this property is in the growth area boundary, however, to be annexed, you, the developer, are going to have to provide adequate capacities for water and sewer before you can develop.
Yeah, I believe you can do that. Now, that has to be done very clearly, and it certainly is helpful if your town code also has very clear provisions for new development coming in to provide for services. But like your plan, the annexation plan you would want it to say, the plan for financing this future development is that the developer is going to provide, 250 gallons a day of water. You don't want money, because money doesn't come out of a tap. A lot of jurisdictions, and this works in some places, let you pay a fee in lieu of finding the water.
See, I would like that information to be known to a developer prior to them putting together
I
a
agree.
plan. Because then it's all on the table right from the start. If you are in the growth area boundary and you decide to request annexation, you are going to be required to provide whatever, in this case, adequate capacities.
I would suggest further that your code provisions, which would address that, you would also want to be available to any other major expansion of use in your town. Even somebody who is already in the growth area boundary, let's say you've got a commercial user, and one of those guys out there on 31. I always get those numbers confused. On 31, wants to quadruple the size of its operation and is going to quadruple its water usage. Do you have enough water to serve, or do you want also to make that kind of requirement part of the expansion of an existing building or buildings, as the case may be? Something to think about. A lot to think about with this process. And that's where I'm going to look at the thinkers down here who have a whole lot more information than I do. This is just how it's done under the law. Bing, your go. And once you actually look at this, if you have any more questions, we can fill in any blanks.
Drew, Dave, do you have any other, thanks, Dave, that was excellent. Any other questions, thoughts for Michelle before we move on?
Pretty much covered. So at what point does, say, the adequate facilities laws for the county would kick?
The adequate facilities laws for the county are not applicable in the town.
Okay.
You have to have your own, and you have some.
Yeah, okay.
But if you're looking at something, a major change, it's like they tell you, like, if you're having a major life change, review your insurance. It's kind of the same thing. If you're having a major structural change, addition, modification within your town, it may not be the only thing you need to look at. You may need to look at a whole lot of other things in your town, especially with something like this, provision of services. Because if you're adding a whole lot of people, do you have enough police? Do you have enough fire capacity? All those things are issues.
I think, my opinion is, if we're to the point where we're talking about annexation and the property owner is already coming in with the idea of being able to do or request this, my personal opinion is that they probably already reached out to an engineer. They probably already have a conceptual plan in mind, and I think they're probably further along than what, we are.
Oh, I'm certain you're correct. The reason this conversation came up is we've had, including, I think, we've had some shortfalls in our attendance at the Planning Commission, so not everyone knows everything. But since the question has come up, how do you do it? If we want to do it, how do we do it? So that's this. We did discuss getting the property owner who is interested in being in the growth area boundary to come in. Come in with I know that there's council, and I'm sure you're right. They have their ducks are not all in a row, they're all in the same pond. So they're ready to start talking. But the Planning Commission wanted to have a little more information before we got to the please come to our meeting stage.
Since this is this is new to all of us, I thought it was good to have Michelle give us the perspective of process. And then also, having been at several of the town council meetings over the past year, I know that Gary and Wayne have talked about some of the resources here in town. So I felt like, let's have a session for the Planning Commission, since we're at a point with the comprehensive plan, that it will be helpful for us to have these components as we're making our decision to finalize that plan. And I'm done filibustering. I think it's time to turn it over, I guess, Wayne. or is it Gary? I don't know who put this together. Either one of you.
So we were asked to put together for, this continued conversation, the basically available, the usage for water, and sewer, and then in relation to what we're currently using, and then also what we're permitted to use. So the spreadsheet I gave you guys copies of there. So we have two main water sources, and I've got 3 years of data here, plus 24, for 2024, we have 5 months of data so far. That data in the 5-month period is not included in the 3-year average. So for the combination of Hillside Wells and Mainspring, our 2 water sources, the average gallons per day, 3-year average from 21 to 23 is 94,681 gallons per day. So on the permitted capacity side, we have a daily permitted capacity of 53,000 for Hillside, and then Mainspring is 143,000 per day, and that gives a total of 196. And then the water permits are a little bit different. They allow for a maximum day. Is that right, Wayne? A maximum day?
Correct.
Withdrawal for Hillside of 80,000 and Mainspring of 202,000 for a total of 282,000. So what's key here is that I'll read the note at the bottom of that spreadsheet, is that Maryland Department of the Environment requires a capacity management plan when water and or sewer flows reach 80% of your permitted capacity. Okay, so you can't use all your permitted capacity without having a plan in effect to say how you're going to mitigate those deficiencies. So 80% calculation of the 196 on the water side is 156,800. Then we throw in, we use a drought factor of 30,000 gallons. And also note there that 30,000 gallon drought factor is an average or a base number. Depending on the severity of the drought, that number can be even higher than that. Depends on how long we're in and what kind of restrictions we might be on and things like that. So then you take out your 3-year average of 94,681. That leaves you available capacity for water of 32,119 gallons per day. Based on permits and based on use.
I ask a question? Sure. 5 months this year, 112,000. So that's not even half of the year. So you theoretically could double that. That's 224,000 if you extrapolate that. And I mean, it's more than that, but just keeping it simple math, it's more like about 250,000. So that's not even close to the 3-year average of 94.
Right, exactly.
Because that really skews then this analysis. I appreciate what you did with the 3-year, because you did not have a full year.
I don't even have, it should get, the water, these numbers come from what are called our MOR reports that our MES, who operates our water and wastewater, has to report monthly, daily and monthly to MDE, and then we get those monthly totals. So the water numbers for the month come in usually the first week of the month, and then the sewer numbers come in about the 3rd week of the month. So they'll be coming in for June, is what I'm getting at.
But obviously, for 5 months, it's more than any of the other 3 years for an entire year. So,
Yeah, it's gallons per day, yeah.
gallons per day. Okay. So this available capacity of 32,000 is going to be significantly less than that. Once, because when you're pointing up here, I'm assuming you're talking about Snyder Summit.
Being built out, yeah.
And
Okay.
also, depending on the severity of drought-like conditions, kind of like what we're in now, we could expect to see that number even lower. Something else to consider is sprinkler systems. They're becoming a little bit more popular and being required. So although the impacts are short-term, they're still impacts. So we need to, prepare ourselves for that as well. And as the requirements get tighter We could expect it in all new construction, but even in existing structures and buildings within the town now, specifically commercial applications, would hit us the hardest. So that initial impact would significantly affect our daily totals. So if you look at the second category in the permitted capacity, you see that there's a max. And the max is what's permitted through the state, the maximum withdrawal average. And so those particular numbers are a little misleading. They're a little high. That just gives us a little cushion that if we need to pull more from one water source than we typically do, it allows us to do that. But for instance, and I'll cite Hillside Wells specifically right now, the daily max is 53. 53 is all that station can produce currently the way it's designed. It will not go above 53. The 80,000 is not realistic in its current operation. We're unsure if we could even get to the 80,000 in a day. So that particular number there is a false number, and it's all about sustainability, really, when it comes to water and sewer. How long can you sustain the initial impacts and burden to the system? And quite honestly, based on the spreadsheet here, with the available capacity of 32,000, it doesn't, even consider a severe drought. We're not looking too good there, and then with the sewer, we're not looking too good there either. So someone would have to make significant investment if they wanted to build within the town at this point. And as we move forward, we're looking to drill some other wells and some other locations. It's more or less for redundancy, for existing capacity and supply demand. It gives you operational flexibility, and that's what we're looking to do. We are in the process of a permit modification, and that permit modification, in my opinion, will give us even more flexibility. However, it's still restrictive in that the 196 number, it won't change. I'm just, basing this off of the modifications based off of our ability to source water in different locations, basically. So.
Two things I'll add to that Wayne said, is those daily and maximum numbers that we list here are directly from our permit from the state. Those numbers are, and those permits have been in place for several years. They get renewed every, 5 years, Wayne, I think it is?
Correct.
And then just another thing to consider as we move into the sewer, it's water in, it's sewer out. You can't have one without the other.
And the state, they set the numbers. So our water is appropriated. So how they determine that number is based on the watersheds in the area and the recharge rate and the drainage basins of our area and how it impacts the aquifers and things like that. There's a very scientific calculation. The daily numbers reflect that more than the max. When you do well testing, when you drill, there's 96-hour tests. And so the 96-hour tests show you a narrow window in time that in a perfect world, this is how much water you can extract from that well. But the total amount of water that you can pump varies seasonally. And it varies based on the watershed that well is connected to. Unfortunately, with New Windsor, we're in the Dickinson watershed, and primarily all our source water is in the Dickinson watershed. If we could drill in another location and get into like Five Daughters Run or somewhere like that, we could source water where they wouldn't affect one another. In other words, there would be greater separation. And that's something that we don't have right now. Are there other options? Yes. Are they cost effective? No. So anyone that wants to annex within the town should probably be responsible for sourcing the water and the modification of the appropriations to accommodate their needs.
Wayne, were, the houses in Snyder Summit that were built, do they have sprinkler systems?
They do.
All of them?
Anything after 2005.
2005. Do we have to, take that into consideration in any of our water factors, like we do with commercial, we don't do anything?
We never have.
No, we never have. So we have sprinkler fees that are assessed. There are 4 businesses in town that are assessed to sprinkler
They're
fees.
not residential.
We don't assess residential fees. It's one of those situations where it's a regulation that kind of snuck up on us. We don't have really codes pertaining to that. It would be wise to do so. The laterals off the main are 1.5 inches, and then the meters themselves are inch. So based on inch meter and the flow that could go through that meter, it could be relatively impactful to the town if even a private sprinkler system was in service. But be mindful that that's a lot better than connecting to a hydrant and having to put a fire out through a hydrant.
Those sprinkler systems in residential are designed to run for so many gallons per minute for 10 to 15 minutes, and if it ain't out, it's burnt. I mean, it's the way it is. It's not good. It's not, you're not talking a lot of water. In a
I just didn't know if
residential
we had to do any additional planning
setting.
for our whole
Good
water
point.
system.
Yeah. And those sizes that Wayne referenced changed at the county when the requirement for sprinkler systems went into effect. So the lateral line used to be smaller and the meter used to be smaller. So when they passed that law to say anything built after this date, they increased the line size and they increased the meter size to accommodate that flow needed for, in the event a fire were to take place.
Thank you.
We've got 3 more minutes, and because we need to transition over. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting us do this and butt right up against it.
So sewer, I'll hit sewer real quick.
Yeah, if you could
Yeah,
get
so sewer, again, it's 3-year average. You see that for the plant. And so these are effluent numbers again from our MORs from the state. 3-year average is 74,303. Our permitted capacity is 115,000. 80% of that is 92,000. And then we put in a 5% reserve factor of 4,600, and that 5% is of the 92,000. And that leaves an available capacity of 18,400 gallons per day. Pretty straightforward there.
And most of that disappears if that 83.4 continues.
Continues on, yeah,
And essentially, that capacity is almost gone.
essentially, yes.
So we're currently in the process of performing a water sewer capacity study. It'll go into a little bit more detail than what the spreadsheet has on it. Basically, it's an assessment of the entire water distribution system and sewer system, redundant capacities. It should tell us things like, okay, how much storage do we have if a well site goes down and we're just pulling off of a tower? Things like that. Those aren't even factors in this spreadsheet. So if we expand much more, we might go from 1 day of, or 1 to 2 days of maintaining with no water source to less than that. So that's something to consider.
I have one question. The drought factor, is that loss? The 30,000 gallon per day?
That's a cushion. It just gives us a little bit of a cushion in the event of a drought. We're not allocating water we simply do not have, we simply
okay.
cannot pump.
Okay, I didn't know that was a loss of, okay.
Wayne, something to reflect on what you said. Going back to the idea where you said that if something was annexed and the water was an issue, make the developer or the property owner drill their own well. That happens all the time. That's not far-fetched. We do that on every property we do, and I think you'd want to, if it gets to that point, you would want that to be a part of it, for them to supply their own water.
About the waste, or the sewage part.
So it's different story, you know, you either have capacity or you don't, but water, there's ways to get around it, so.
So I know there are minimum, well, requirements as far as gallons per minute. I think the minimum for a commercial well is about 30 gallons a minute. Depending on the size of the development, you know, we would probably look towards more of 45 gallons a minute or greater as a minimum, honestly. 35 isn't a whole lot of water in the grand scheme of things. And we want the developer or development to be independently sustainable.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. We didn't have any other business or on the agenda for the planning commission at this time. Next meeting will be the 22nd of July. Hopefully, everybody will be able to attend. And can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Glenn,
Second.
second by Drew. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.